voter suppression is a big ploy by the Republicans. It always has been. Conservatives have thought that by making access to the ballot box, they've thought about it, since Jim Crow laws and segregation, that access to the ballot box is always the most important thing for Democrats because it gets young voters there. It gets people who are poorer to the polls. Rolling Stone's Ari Berman has written an article about how the GOP is really conducting, and it's called the GOP War on Voting. It's shocking what is going on right now. The Koch brothers, naturally the funders of the Tea Party, are very, very much involved in that. And what's happening, let's just look at this quote by Paul Weyrich. Paul Weyrich said this in 1980 to a group of evangelical leaders. This was in 1980, and Weyrich is still at it because he's got a conservative advocacy group that is trying to help the GOP fight voter registration. He said, "I don't want everybody to vote. A matter of fact, our leverage in the elections quite candidly goes up as the voting populace goes down." This is Paul Weyrich, said that in 1980. That's 31 years ago. It's still going on right now. The American Legislative Exchange Council, which is funded in part by the Koch brothers, is doing work in many states to try and get access to the ballot boxes, limited to Americans. This is something that's going to really impact this election. It's an election where there is very little, as we can see here now, margin for error. States all across the country, in Kansas and Alabama, now require you to have proof of citizen before you register, proof of citizenship before registering, which that doesn't anger me. I mean, you should be a citizen to vote. That doesn't bother me. Florida and Texas made it harder for groups like the League of Women Voters to register new voters. The League of Women Voters has stopped in Florida right now registering new voters because there's a penalty. If you cannot prove your signatures, there are penalties up to $1,000 that can be waged per signature. It's really unbelievable what's going on. Texas, the same thing. You have Rock the Vote. Remember, Rock the Vote was a big part of the Clinton election and has continued, even though you don't see it, as you don't see their work as much because MTV is not having them. The whole idea that Republicans are trying to marginalize the people that vote, especially the people that put Obama into the White House, is scary stuff.
Right. And now you read that article. I've got a different one from Bloomberg where they explain that 34 different states are considering voter ID laws. Now, a lot of people might think, well, look, I got an ID, and before I vote, if I show my driver's license, what's the big deal, right? But that's because that's your experience. What you don't realize is that there's a lot of different experiences in this country for people who think that way. For example, people who live in New York City, they don't drive. A great majority of them don't drive, so they never had a reason to get a driver's license. For me, growing up in a suburb, not having a driver's license was crazy, right? I couldn't imagine it, right? But when you think about it that way, you go, oh, okay, I get it. Now, are you ready for these startling numbers? 11% of the people in this country that are legal citizens who have a right to vote do not have IDs.
Not to mention, can I further that number? Among those numbers, the numbers get higher among constituencies that traditionally vote Democratic, and this is in the Rolling Stone article as well. 18% of young voters don't have ID, 25% of African Americans don't.
And 18% of citizens above the age of 65 do not have ID. It's also demographic, too. People who happen to be on the lower end of the socioeconomic status tend to vote Democratic more, right? So now, of the ones that are over 65 that don't have IDs, they tend to be poorer, right? So they're like, oh, fantastic. The older people vote at a higher rate, but if we can knock out some of the poorer or middle-class older people who don't have IDs, oh, it's a huge win. We knock out the young that vote Democratic. 25% of African Americans don't have IDs. You knock out a quarter of the black voting population in this country, that's an enormous win for Republicans. And by the way, a giant loss for our democracy, because we're all supposed to encourage voting, right? But it's basically the Republicans both being, I suppose, strategically smart, but at the same time saying, hey, you know what? Yeah, democracy, when it's convenient, right? And when it's inconvenient, I'm going to try to prevent as many people from voting as possible.
It's a perfect example of their hypocrisy. And when it works for them, use it, and when it doesn't, don't. And it's also an example of why every election matters and why state legislature elections matter. In Florida and Iowa, they have now barred all former felons from voting. They've taken the franchise away from people who have voted previously. I mean, they've taken it away. They were previously eligible voters that can no longer vote. And so, these sorts of tactics, you see them in little ways. They may think, well, it happens in Florida, it does not happen, so that's one state. Well, that's one state with all those electoral votes, and you saw what Florida meant in the year 2000. So just a few votes matter in a state the size of Florida. And the whole point here is that when you elect your state legislatures, these are the kinds of things that can happen, and it's going to hurt Obama.
And so one other aspect of that's so important. That's why the U.S. attorney scandal under Bush was so important. Because what Rove did was they pressured all these different U.S. attorneys that are not supposed to receive political pressure. They're just supposed to, remember, they're law enforcement. They're supposed to do their job, go after crimes, right? And he would pressure them to bring up voter fraud cases. And the New Mexico Attorney General, who was a Republican through and through, said later, he said, look, I wasn't opposed to looking for voter fraud. I looked for years, and I couldn't find a single case.
Yeah.
And then when Rove came to me and said, make one up anyway, I couldn't do it. And so that's why he got fired. He got fired for not making up a voter fraud case. Now, why are they doing that? So that they can then turn around and go, look at all these voter fraud cases. We need voter ID. If we don't have voter IDs, how do we know that this fraud is not running amok?
Yeah.
In reality, there's almost no voter fraud in the entire country. It's amazing how little voter fraud there is.
Between a probe by the Justice Department between the years 2002 and 2007, had failed to prosecute a single person for going to the polls and impersonating an eligible voter, which the anti-fraud laws are supposedly designed to stop. Out of the 300 million votes cast in that period, federal prosecutors convicted only 86 people out of 300 million for voter fraud.
And that's under the Bush administration.
Yes, that's 2002 to 2007.
And they were trying like a Dickens to find voter fraud, and they still couldn't do it.
But require student residency, student tax paying, as they're trying to do in Maine. And Maine is trying to get you to pay taxes as a student in Maine or else not be able to vote.
So the bottom line is, when you hear voter fraud from Republicans, they don't care about voter fraud. What they're actually trying to do is disenfranchise as many of you as possible so they can win elections by limiting our democracy to the people they think are going to vote for them and not for you.